Thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome to the end of the year, and we're glad you could make it today. Our webinar topic is going to be New Year, New Meetings, 5 resolutions to make for 2019. And your hosts, of course, today are going to be Elise Keith, the co-founder of Lucid Meetings and author of Where the Action Is, the meetings that make or break your organization. I am Trisha Harris. I'm the product evangelist here at Lucid. And I encourage you to just use the questions box if you like. Also use the chat as we've been doing. And here's a little housekeeping slide before we begin. So we will send the slides and the recording as a follow-up after this webinar. And of course, like I said, chat away if you like. And this is going to be a very interactive webinar. So we're going to keep your attention the whole time. Get ready, because here comes your first poll. And I'm going to hand it over to Elise with that.
All right, so poll number 1, the whole point of this webinar is to look back on 2018 and think about how did that go? And so what we want to do is know, when you think about your meetings in 2018, on average, how did that go? Give yourself a quick rule of thumb rating.
Are they great?
And your answers are, hey, 2018, it was excellent. And we're here, and you know what? We just want to make sure it keeps on getting better. Or,
Right.
They're great. They're good. There's room for improvement, but we're doing pretty good. Acceptable. Yeah. Okay. That happened. Neither good nor bad. Not good. Oh, ouch. A little bit painful. And then finally, terrible. Anybody here suffering from really terrible meetings? All right. It looks like quite a few of our votes are in. So let's see how we're all feeling about 2018. It looks like by and large, we're feeling okay. It was acceptable. It wasn't great. It wasn't awesome. There's room for improvement. So with that, let's take a moment and share our 5 strategies for helping you make 2019 even better. And before we even do that, I'm going to just stop the presentation for a second. And I want to share with you a little bit about the perspective that I'm bringing to this conversation today, so you know a little bit about where I'm coming from. So first, I have glad tidings. It's seasonally appropriate. Glad tidings. The secret to your great team meetings is not better people. It's also not using an agenda or making meetings shorter. The secret isn't sending all of your managers for people skills training. And I'm sharing that because I used to think that those were the keys. My first full-time job was working at an internet software company where we had terrible meetings. My first manager was this young, soft-spoken, lovely gentleman who seemed to be, one of those types who looked a little uncomfortable looking girls in the eye. And he led these meetings that just drifted. I mean, we never did anything so bold as hold each other to an agreement of any kind. And it was really hard to stay awake. And I thought, my manager needed training. Actually, let's be honest. I felt he was incompetent and he needed to go. So I was really excited when I moved to the product team, where we had a manager who was experienced and energetic and driven. And imagine my surprise when all of those meetings were terrible too. That team wasn't drifty. That team was antagonistic. They fought all the time about what kind of technology we'd use and how to use a database. And the result was that we ended up trying to prove to each other we were right more often than we were actually building software for clients. Now, in my heart, I believe that you're either working on a solution or you don't have any reason to complain. But I couldn't figure this one out. We had this CEO, and he kept telling us all the time that meetings were a total waste of time. And yet we kept meeting more and more every day. And if it was such a big waste of time, why did we do that? I mean, it made no sense. So, the problem, of course, was that I was trying to solve a problem before I knew what success looked like. I didn't have a vision for what it was like to work in a company with successful meetings. But I think like many of us, I knew how to spot the lousy ones. And the lousy ones are full of people behaving badly. So I was convinced that our meeting problem was a people problem. And then I had two experiences that opened my eyes. First, I began working with international standards organizations. And these are these large nonprofit groups that get together and they decide how things like how the companies are going to build the USB plugs so that they all work together, or how wide a road needs to be so that all the car wheels can fit within the lanes. And standards work, by definition, involves all of these people with competing values and perspectives from government and academia and consumers and companies. And they're all working together. So these folks have like way bigger disagreements than my product team did back at the office. And yet they had a system that helped them get past all of that. That system is built on a series of well-defined meetings that explain how the work gets done. For each and every one of those meetings, you know how to participate, you know how decisions are going to be made, you know what the outcome is going to be, and exactly what to expect. It's all spelled out. Now, they're often really boring meetings, but they work. They got the job done. And the people in standards work don't have to like each other to get that work done. So that was the first revelation. The second revelation came when our product team back in the office adopted agile practices. And agile is this way of breaking the work that you're doing into these smaller pieces and learning as you go so that you can continually refine your plans and make steady progress. So in many ways, agile is totally different, couldn't be more different than standards work. And yet, like the standards work, it depends on a system of meetings that spell out exactly when and how the team members will coordinate. And as our product team began experimenting with these meetings, we came together. We got aligned, we got faster, and we started shipping better software. What's more, we also started to have more fun. Like the beer and the Nerf guns weren't just, office perks. They were actually how we celebrated together. So that was my second revelation. So starting with these two foundational revelations, I began to see what success looks like. I discovered that everything changes when you change the meetings. The secret to successful meetings isn't about the people, it's about systems. And we founded Lucid Meetings based on this insight. And since then, we have seen successful teams from all domains use a system of meetings. I mean, you'll find it when you look at the elite military groups and the investment bankers and the top surgical teams and high-end restaurants. They all have this really well-defined system of intentionally designed meetings that help them get work done. So over the past 8 years, our team has worked with thousands of companies just like yours to help them transform the way they meet. And, if there's one thing I know to be true, it's this. While it is crazy impossible hard to fix culture or other people's relationships or people, it's totally possible to fix meetings. And when you fix the meeting, you begin to fix everything else. So today, let's look and explore what success looks like. So whether you are already enjoying excellent meetings, I didn't see anybody on the list there, but I'm sure some of you are close. Whether you're doing okay, but hoping for better, or even if you're suffering through terrible meetings led by other people that you can't control, I promise you'll learn something new here today that you can put to work. All right, sound like a plan? Okay, I'm gonna share that presentation again. Let's get into the first of our 5 resolutions. Number 1, know your business case. So often the number one question I'm asked by people who are trying to fix their meetings is, hey, Elise, how do I convince my boss that we need to take this seriously? And the answer to that is to know your business case. Now, if you are also in charge, you also need to know your business case. And it's pretty straightforward. When it comes to meetings, there are really 4 different ways that meetings drive business value, okay? First, productivity. This is the obvious one. You know, we want to find ways to use our meetings to do more with less. And there are several ways that you can do this. Very, very straightforward tactics. These are often the things you'll see other experts recommend you do to fix a meeting culture. Let me tell you, it is just a start. Number 1, shorter meetings. Spend less time in meetings, you have more time to do other things. That's one way to increase productivity. Fewer people. Definitely want to make sure you don't have any extra people in those meetings who don't need to be there. Fewer meetings. I have had many people say, you know, I would love to work on my meetings, Elise, but I'm too busy in meetings back to back to have any time to think about how to fix my meetings. You know, a classic example of not stopping to sharpen your saw, take some of those meetings out. That will help quite a bit. So that's about less, right? Not particularly inspiring, but it can free you up to do other work. Let's talk about more. The other way to increase productivity is to be really clear on what it is each meeting is trying to achieve. What are those outcomes? This was one of the things we saw in the systems that we found in high-performing teams. They know, for example, if you go into a high-end restaurant and they have a staff change meeting, they will often start by tasting the food. Like, what's on the menu today, right? Several clear outcomes for that. They want everybody there to know what it is they're serving people and whether, so they can talk intelligently about it. There are some other benefits to that that we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's a real clear, obvious outcome of why they're getting together and why they meet. So that increases your productivity. And then finally, you can use your meetings to drive more energy, inspiration, and momentum into the team. So all of these, this whole section on business case, I'm going to go briefly through these 4. Productivity is the first of the 4. And then afterwards, if this is a place where you've got some real interest, we did a whole series on this. I've got some worksheets so that you can go ahead and calculate these things for your own team and build your own business case. All right, number 2, sales, reach. Impact, reach, sales, impact. So when we meet with our clients, when we meet with our constituents, our students, whoever it is that we serve, we are creating a relationship with that person in a meeting. And the teams that do it better and the people who do it better are more successful, to the order of 6 to 7 times more successful, according to the studies, in actually bringing in that revenue. If you are in sales or customer service of that nature, I hope that you have seen some of these tactics and some of this research. Definitely let us know if you'd like to go deeper on that. There's some great stuff going on right now where they can show that if you are in a sales position and you listen more than you talk, you've got a much better chance of creating that relationship. So productivity, sales. Next, employee engagement and retention. This one is huge. So we know that engagement and retention are how people create their understanding of what we do, their sense of belonging, and bring their best to our teams, right? It's so, so expensive to lose a high-end employee and then have to retain them. So there are some great scientific studies on this one. This is a little science mathy, which is awesome. But here is a model of the standard path coefficient of things that you can do in meetings that directly relate to employees feeling engaged. So this applies mostly to our team meetings and our one-on-ones with our managers. And they're basically saying that, you know, if you make sure that the meeting is relevant to those people, also helpful for productivity because you don't get extra people in your meeting. If you manage that time well, again, also useful for productivity. And then you make sure people have a voice, you increase employee engagement. This particular study and a suite of studies that went with it found that getting rid of all of the other factors, job type, industry, everything else, If you run meetings well with your team, you increase engagement. If you run meetings poorly, you drive people away. If you find the standard path of coefficients and the X-wing of awesome things like this really compelling, I do want to take a moment to invite you to our next webinar. It's going to be on January 10th with Steve Rogelberg. He's fun to listen to, and he'll be sharing the surprising science of meetings. As everyone will tell you, he is arguably the world's most preeminent meeting scientist. So please join us for that. But that's about engagement. So we've talked about business case. This whole section is business case, right? So productivity, do more with less. Sales, make more money, make more reach. ROI of engagement and retention, when it is sustainable, when you build it into your practice, this ROI is pretty freaking awesome. You get outperformance by companies that have practices like this of 18% in earnings growth, 5% in gross profits, 7% in total assets. Basically, they crush it. So when you have practices like this, you crush it. It's awesome stuff. There's a business case for running better meetings. Finally, we've talked about productivity, sales, engagement. Let's talk about decision velocity. Picture of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is a happily successful guy working on dominating the universe. And one of the keys that they continue to tout, they have a very strong meeting culture. And he will share quite often how important it is that they are able to make high quality decisions quickly, high velocity decision making. That's possible when you have a mechanism, when you have a structure for making decisions, and you know how to make those decisions rapidly. So I talked earlier in my epiphany story about going into the standards world. Now that standards process, which is very formal and very prescriptive, often takes a very, very long time. It often takes a couple years to get a new standard out. One thing I watched one of the organizations, ASTM, during my tenure, figure out how to really dial down their meetings. And they were able to take that entire process and shrink it down in some cases to 6 months. Now, and they were very, very clear. Our goal is to outperform the standards world and deliver standards faster than anybody else. Lots of, crew cut ex-military standards people. And they were awesome. They just rocked it. So that's the kind of thing that is being brought by Amazon as well into their marketing positioning. Know your business case. Do you need to increase your decision quality and velocity? So resolution 1, know your business case. Let's see, given that, another poll. How would your organization most benefit from improving your meetings? Would it be increased productivity, increased sales, reach, engagement and retention, decision quality? Are there some of you who need it all? And I see some votes coming in here. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of folks who are keen on everything. I'll give you a couple more seconds. We're going to close the poll in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. And it looks like productivity is not as popular nor as sales as engagement, decision quality, and yeah, a whole lot of everything. So with that, Tricia, before we move on to number 2, so our first resolution of the 5 is know the business case. Before we move on to the next one, do we have any questions we should stop and take?
That's a good question. I haven't seen any questions. Just as a side note, I'm not sure if I can access the questions box today, but if you do have any questions, put them in the chat, because then I'll see them. But I did want to bring to the front that Dave Scott had posted in the chat a really interesting quote from Peter Drucker, which
Oh,
very much relates to what you were just saying about it's not about the people, it's about the systems and the processes. It says, don't change culture, change habits. And he's
yes.
saying, for instance, culture is a product of what is done and how, when, etc. So the culture comes later after you're able to apply those processes or those systems
You
or
know,
habits.
there's a lot of fabulous work going on right now around personal habits. I don't know how many people have
Yep.
seen James Clear's work or
Mm-hmm.
Charles Duhigg's work on atomic habits, or
Yeah.
the power of habits. Those ideas apply to us in the larger sense. In when we have more time and we talk in a longer presentation, we really look at how an organization is a complex adaptive system, and how you behave, how you act attracts some kinds of behaviors and puts boundaries or shows people what's unacceptable in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to number 2 and talk about some of the ways that we can build in respect, which is another way to attract the kind of behavior that we're looking for. Now, this is a picture of a goat. I like goats. They're really, really cute, but like, why did I put build in respect and I put up a picture of a goat? Well, as I was searching for pictures to use for this one, I typed in respect and I got all of these random pictures, including this picture of a goat. So I thought, well, golly, it sure seems like we don't know what respect looks like. So let's take a second and talk about that. When it comes to meetings in our organizations, what is it that we need to respect about one another? What is it that we're trying to build in for? Go ahead and let me know your answers in the chat. Let's see what we have to say. I know certainly when we look at building in respect, we talk about respect for people's time. The other thing that we can see a lot of, does anybody else have any other ideas of things that we need to respect in a meeting? Everybody's drawn a blank. See, it's all goats. Other person's concern, excellent. Point of view, voice, absolutely. Listening, yes, excellent, excellent. All of these things, right? How do we give people space? Dignity, that's a wonderful one. How do you respect somebody's, need to feel proud of themselves? Wonderful. So yes, exactly. These are absolutely the kinds of things we need to build into our meetings. So when you do, and when you get it right, what you achieve is what we call high perceived meeting quality. High perceived meeting quality is this feeling that you have after you've participated in a high quality meeting. So obviously, for those who are talking about voice and listening and whatnot, that means we have to have the people in our room who can participate. And then we also have to make sure that that meeting's high quality. So how do we do that? Well, specifically, what we're looking for to create a high quality meeting is a meeting that's got clarity of purpose, a clear structure that helps us achieve that purpose, that's respectful of that time, and then gets results. And the way you do this in practice is that you go ahead and you write that purpose out in the invitations. Purpose is usually stated as a verb. It states why you're meeting. So to make a decision, to interview new candidates, to check progress on our next project. That's a verb, the purpose. The other thing you want to put into the invitation are the desired outcomes. And these are the nouns of our meetings. They are what we're going to get at the end. These are our action items and our decisions and our, wonderful team bonding, whatever those nouns are going to be, clarity about whether this is the right person for us to hire. The nouns are your desired outcomes. Put both of those into your meeting invitation. This makes it possible for people to understand how to participate and why they want to participate. It also makes them feel that the meeting is going to be high quality because it's clear. If you want to increase their sense of high quality even more, you'll put some structure in place. Now, often structure is represented by the agenda. The agenda's really marketing for your meeting. It's a way of telling people enough information about how you plan to get from your purpose to your desired outcomes so that they know what to expect and they can have those expectations met. And then finally, time. In practice, this is the calendar. You know, we set out on the calendar just the right amount of time we need to be able to get to our results. No more. Don't default your calendars to an hour. Respect their time. Use only the time you need. The other key to respecting time is to actually start and end on time, something we're going to definitely strive to do for you today. So that's the key, the essences of how you build in respect. So moving forward, we're through 5 resolutions. Number 1, know the business case. Number 2, build in respect. Show people why they can be there, how to participate, use their time wisely, give them a chance to have a voice. Any thoughts on this one before we move on?
I like that you say that the agenda is the marketing piece in between. When you from the purpose to the desired outcome, your agenda is the marketing to tell everyone how you're going to achieve that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a really common misunderstanding that people have about agendas, which is why they're such a broken tool for so many folks. Because when you are first coming into a business, we tend not to get good training on how to run meetings. We tend to just kind of watch and see what other people do. Another reason why you want a system, so that people can watch and see successful habits to be brought up into. But what they will see is that, yes, my best boss used an agenda. Well, what's an agenda? Well, it's the list of things we're going to talk about. Okay, so I've got a meeting tomorrow. So what do we need to talk about? Well, there's marketing, and there's that one project with Bill, and then there's like where to have lunch, and then and you end up with what we call the laundry list. Mm-hmm. A laundry list doesn't have a process. It's not oriented towards achieving any specific goal. And what we find in practice now, our team has, we offer meeting management software, which has a way for people to set up agendas online and work through them. And we find that by and large, if a team is using that kind of an agenda, they never finish it. They have all these items on their list and they never get to half of them. It's a great way to blow people's expectations and make them feel sort of cheated about why they were there. That not what you said would happen never even happened. So instead, what you need to think about with an agenda is that an agenda is the version of your plan for achieving the outcomes that you share with everybody else. And like you said, marketing. Okay, let's move on. So that's 2. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, make accountability to results possible. Now, I love this picture because it's got some flair, and you can see that this group is united. They're all in uniform, but each part of the uniform is a little bit different, but also because it's about bowling. And with bowling, how you keep score is crazy obvious, right? You hit the pins, they all go down, hooray, you win. That's possible in our businesses too. How do you make it crazy obvious? Well, oftentimes I get asked, and they're like, hey, Elise, we have these great meetings and we come to all kinds of great decisions, but how do I get my team to be accountable to what we decided? What do you all think? What's getting in the way of that accountability in the first place? Go ahead and type your answers in the chat. I will tell you that while I personally believe that there are some people who will say anything to get out of a meeting room, for the most part, our problems with accountability aren't problems with willingness. Fear of failure, that's a great one. Anything else that you think is getting in the way of accountability? A fear that accountable means an opportunity to get into trouble. Yes, absolutely. That we all forget things. That's a huge one. So a lot of times when we are looking at what we have decided in a meeting and whether or not that actually gets done, a lot of what gets into the way is life. And to help illustrate that, here are some pictures from an experiment run by the Improv Everywhere group in 2013, where they deployed a team of seeing eye people throughout the streets of New York to help folks who wanted to text on their phone walk safely and not fall into manholes. Now, the project was, it's a joke, right? They're the improv group. And yet, as they went through the city, while some people understood that, a lot of people were kind of interested in where they might get one of those. They were looking to sign up. So it's really an amazing statement about how crazy distracted we are these days. And when it comes to our teams and folks walking into our meetings, it's not just technology. There are actually 6 fields of distraction. So yes, technology can be one. All of the bleaking, all of the bleeping. Yeah, all of the all of the things that go off that keep us from being focused on what we need to do. Physical pain. That's one we don't necessarily think about very often, but if you're uncomfortable, you're not going to really be attentive to what's happening in that room. Emotional pain. We all have lives. Not only can things be rough within the workplace, but we, are full beings that don't actually get to separate work and home and all of the things. Lots of emotional pain can get in the way. Unfinished business. This is that big list of to-dos that you have running in the back of your head. Oh gosh, did I take the garbage out? All of the things that are keeping you from being fully present when you make new commitments. Multitasking. Turns out, I don't know if you've seen the research on multitasking, but multitasking is a bit of a myth. It's really serial monotasking. People are able to switch more quickly. Multitasking 2 things at once, both things get short shrift. And then finally, distracting yourself. There are a lot of ways to spend your time that aren't quite what you were supposed to be doing, but they keep you entertained and let you procrastinate a bit before you get onto it. So when we are working with our teams and we're seeking to improve accountability, we've got all of this stuff going on, along with all of the other things we've already talked about, fear and whatnot. So what do you do? Well, I love this quote. This quote says, "Discipline is remembering what you want." So both the word accountability and the word discipline have these really heavy negative connotations. They're kind of punishing. And I love this quote because it flips it. It says, it's not about punishment. It's about making it so that we can remember what we want. It's about getting what we want. Hooray! So how do you do that in your meetings to increase your accountability? Well, you want to make it simple to remember what y'all want. And with this, there's one practice that we see that helps the most. First, write it down. It doesn't exist if you don't write it down. And I know Trisha's got a story about that from just our own meetings a couple of days ago. So you need to write it down, and specifically with the actions, with the things you want people to be accountable about. You write down what it is, who, a person, not a group, a person is meant to do that, and when. Then you confirm those things in the meeting. So if Trisha has an action item, we're going to say, Trisha, does that look correct to you? And can you do that by that date? And Trisha's going to say whatever she's going to say, but she's going to say out loud that she is in fact on board with what's there, or she's going to get it fixed to something she's on board with. Then with this written thing, you publish it right after the meeting. It just goes right out. Everybody's got it in their face. I don't know about you, but I'm going to walk out of this webinar and I'm going to remember 3 things, and I'm going to go and to my next meeting, which starts 20 minutes, right? So it better be right there because I'm going to forget. And then you send it again 1 day before the next meeting. That's the key. That bit is the Oh yeah, I said I would do that thing. And there it is before you walk into the room. And finally, you review those open items in your next meeting, and you will go down each and every one and you will say, did this get done? If it's still open, what's getting in your way? Do we need to change it? Do we still remember what this is? All of those things, you clear that list. So that is one way to increase accountability, by making it possible for people to take things that they attest to owning publicly in front of the group and writing it down and reminding so they can remember them. All right, so that's 1, know the business case. 2, build in respect. 3, make accountability to results possible. Any comments before we move on to 4?
Yeah, I have one. I noticed that Dave Scott had put in the chat that sometimes people are overtasked already. And you mentioned this in the very beginning before we started. Some people didn't hear it, but Elise has a business. She has multiple children. She has a new puppy and a lot of things to do. And I think some people in general, with all the things going on, they're just overtasked to begin with. So that accountability can be difficult. And our story from last week, I've got a couple, but yeah, we were in a meeting. We had another meeting the next day and we knew it. We said, we'll talk about it in tomorrow's meeting, and no one wrote it down. We all forgot. All 3 of us went into the next meeting and completely forgot what we had said. And there's a person on this webinar today who I talked to last week about taking notes as well. And it can be something that is not intuitive necessarily when you first start doing it, taking the notes of the meeting, because you just want to translate what other people are saying in your brain. But it's very, very important to take notes in that other person's words, because that would help, not have misunderstandings, because they may mean something different than what you're thinking that they mean. And so getting those specifics, like who, what, when, is that's really what you need to focus on, because otherwise most of the other stuff is just banter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Michelle asked if we would be sending the presentations and the recording and everything afterwards. And the answer is yes. So please feel free to chill, listen, chat away with us. You don't have to take notes. I will send you everything, I promise. The other thing that practice does for somebody who is crazy overtasked, as I happen to be at the moment, is it puts out in writing something that I can then look at in comparison with my existing task list and go, you know what? I'm sorry, I have to change that date out 2 months because there's no way. So it makes it possible, that moment at the end of the meeting when you're reviewing that task list, for people to take a little bit of ownership and a little bit of self-advocacy for protecting their own ability to be good, trustworthy teammates by saying, my plate is actually full. Help me figure out another way we can get this done. Can we defer it? Can we change the scope? What do we do? So that's an incredible practice that isn't possible if you don't write it down and you don't review it together as a group. Speaking of reviewing it together as a group, let's look at number 4. Number 4 is play as a team. Play as a team. We are familiar with what it means to work together as a team in sports. We are familiar with what it means to work together as a team in the arts, the symphony, theater. We know that the people who are on the team are all going for the goal. The people who are on the team are clear what their role is. Ideally, they have a play or 2 figured out. They've got a way to coordinate and get that job done. The people on the team are contributing to those desired outcomes. They aren't doing this, right? The people on the team are not sitting back on their phones judging the performance of everybody else. And yet, too often in meetings, we see this. We see people who are checked out, who believe that somehow what's going on in that meeting is something other people are responsible for. There's a goal there that those other people are meant to make happen for them. We call this spectator syndrome. You can see it in a lot of the research. People talk about how folks need to keep the meetings more entertaining and keep the energy up, and the facilitator needs to do X, Y, or Z, all of which are these ideas that the other folks in the room are meant to make it go for you. So I am curious, how many of these symptoms of spectator syndrome have you seen in your meetings? That can include things like people who are multitasking. Whatever it is that they feel like they need to do, that is more important than whatever's going on in that meeting. It's people who aren't participating. They show up, but they don't have a question to ask. They don't have a comment to add. They just kind of sit quietly. They're there to watch. If it's a webinar, totally okay, because that's what this is, but there are very few types of meetings where that's the case. Inattentive folks, that will manifest as people saying, hey, sorry, could you repeat the question? I was on mute. Because, when you're on mute, you can't listen. What? Oppositional attendees. This is the guy or the gal who sits in the back of the room and does this and waits for you to prove that you are worth their time, as opposed to doing something to help get you there. And then finally, we have folks who literally fall asleep. So I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to go ahead and vote on this one. 3, 2, 1. And let's close this poll and see what people had to say. All right. It looks like we've seen it all. The spectator syndrome is alive and well in our meetings, especially these passive forms of spectator syndrome, the non-participation and inattentiveness. That at least tends not to be as distracting, but it is a terrible energy drain. So if you remember from earlier, we are looking for high perceived meeting quality. We are looking for people who participate in a high quality meeting that goes towards a clear objective. Non-participation or inattention make that impossible. Those people are not participating. It's also, getting back to business case, a great productivity drain. They're not doing anything useful there. So how do you play as a team? Well, a lot of different ways, but we have a couple of simple suggestions here. First, no spectators. Don't invite people to your meeting if they don't have a role to play on the team. That's also going to keep your meetings tighter. It's going to keep your energy up. It's going to save you some time and money, gives them time to do something else. 2, no ball hogs. So this is about those people who tend to get into a meeting and dominate the conversation. Today, I'm the ball hog, but that's okay because it's a webinar and I'm presenting. But in general, you want to structure your meetings, use a system that gives everybody a chance to have that voice. We're getting back to respect there as well. Oftentimes, things like the go-around, where everybody has a moment to speak, is one way to make sure that everybody's got equal time. No one person is dominating the conversation. There are go-arounds in almost every single effective team meeting I have seen in all of the high performance companies. They're all a little different. We'll talk about that in a second, but almost every single one of them has some way that they get every voice in the room with equal time. Number 3, everyone has a job. So that job might be something like taking notes. That job might be something like watching the time. Always that job should be contributing your ideas and your voice towards the achievement of the goal. Everyone on the team has a job. 4, rotate responsibilities. Now, this is something we have adopted in our own team that has been actually quite useful. So every week we have a standard structure for how we run our meetings, and every week we take turns facilitating. No one person has that job each time. No one person has the job of taking notes every time. We do this because, first of all, it gives all of us a sense of what it means to run that meeting, so we can all contribute to making it better. And it makes sure that we don't fall into a dominant rut, right? Finally, it makes sure that everybody on our team is developing their skills, right? If you only play one position on the team, you know, if you're only the shooter and you're never the goalie, I'm switching sports on you here. Your skill set is going to be limited. So you want to rotate responsibilities, get everybody playing. And then finally, celebrate your wins. Celebrate your wins. Every team that scores a goal has a cheer for it. For these last three, I saw this play out extremely well when I went to visit Zingerman's Community of Business. So for those of you who have read the book, you know this story, but it basically was a totally eye-opening experience for me because they practice what is called open book management. And it's a way of sharing the results, the business results, each and every day with everybody within the company. Zingerman's is a community of businesses that has a deli, they have a cheesemonger shop, they have a candy shop, they do all of these different things. And I went and sat in the weekly meeting for their Roadhouse, which is, you know, a bar, basically, a bar restaurant. And up on the wall, they had all of the numbers, like what's the profit, what's the loss, what are the expenses, what did we take in at the front door, what are our customer service things say, all of the numbers, right? And then they took turns standing up and reporting on the numbers. Now, usually when you see something like that, you think it's going to be the manager who gets up and reports on the numbers and then everybody asks questions. But that's not the case at all. In fact, what happened was individual employees traded every month responsibility for reporting on numbers. So I watched dishwashers who were just fresh out of high school get up and report what the sales were for the front of door. I watched front room hostesses take notes and confirm the action items at the end. They had a line cook who was the facilitator that month. And at the beginning, she had a fabulous icebreaker that they all went around the room and talked about whether they thought it was going to snow. And then at the end, one of their pantry guys, and I didn't quite understand what he did, but he was a pantry guy, and he caught out and he read the Net Promoter Scores, and he talked about what people were happy with. And then specifically, he called out, he says, you know, I'd like to read this comment about Nancy, which was left by a customer, about how Nancy made them feel like family and helped them really celebrate an important occasion as they were recovering from a recent visit to a cancer center. And I watched as Nancy got misty and the rest of the room cried a little bit and clapped and celebrated, and then they wrapped it up. So that practice, everyone had a job. They rotated those jobs and they celebrated as a team. It was really powerful. What a wonderful way to develop the leadership capacity of your younger people. So that's playing as a team. 5 resolutions. We've got 1, know the business case. 2, respect. 3, make accountability to results possible. 4, play as a team. And before we get to our last one, any other comments that we should stop for at the moment?
Just one that Dave Scott wrote, which I thought was very interesting because he's right, and this speaks to exactly what you were saying about rotating responsibilities. He says that meetings are often run in ways that are comfortable for extroverts, and that inhibits introverts even more than their usual tendencies. And so sometimes someone who appears to be a spectator is an introvert out of air they can breathe. So I find that to be an interesting perspective.
You know, one thing I found really fascinating as I went and got my facilitation training is I realized that the majority of the folks seeking to become professional facilitators were actually extreme introverts who wanted to know the secrets. They wanted to know how to make a conversation go, because as introverts, and I register off the charts introvert, so introvert doesn't mean that you can't speak in front of people. It means that, you know, it's kind of draining. So they, you know, they wanted the strategies. They wanted to know how to walk into that room with confidence and be successful. And that's a pretty extreme way to develop that confidence that lets you have enough control that you can manage your energy in a room. It's very powerful when your meetings have a structure that actually anticipates the need of the introverts and the needs of the folks who process more slowly. So there are some people where you ask them a question and they, they kind of actually want to think about it before they just start spouting off an answer.
I do that.
Crazy idea, right? Certainly not a requirement for everybody, but for some people, some silence in which their own mind can work is an enormously powerful thing to build into your meetings. The other thing, and our fifth resolution that's enormously powerful to build into your 2019 meetings, is joy. Bring the joy. One way you might consider doing this is to just Google pictures of joy and share them with your team, because isn't this delightful? Bringing the joy seems frivolous, but it is not. There is a group that does research out of the University of Michigan. Michigan, I think. Ross School of Business. They are the Center for Positive Organizational Studies. So they're looking, like I did, at what makes people successful as opposed to just what are all the problems. And they found that there are basically 5 kinds of energy, or 4. There's physical energy and emotional energy and mental energy, all of which, when we spend them, right, when we put out physical energy or we think really hard on something, we've used it and we need to take a break. But there's a final kind of energy, which is relational energy. It's the energy that's created between 2 people. And there are positive ways that we can create relational energy when we interact together, and it's life-affirming. And that increases energy for everybody. And then there are negative relational energies. So what they found in their research is that high-performing organizations have 3 times more positive energizers, positive relational energy moments than average. And they found this specifically when they were studying meetings. They were looking at the impact of regular one-on-ones with a positive structure to them and regular team meetings. And they found these kinds of interactions much more common in the high-performing organization. So what might that look like in practice? Well, at Starbucks, they begin their meetings at the headquarters with a coffee tasting. Now, this does a number of things for them in a positive relational front. First, they get some coffee. They get to test and see what the product is that they're giving to their customers. So it connects them with their mission as an organization. And finally, they get this moment of downtime where they are sharing food, which is a deeply human ritual that shows you that you're cared for, that you belong. So that's something that they do at Starbucks. We're seeing an increasing number of teams use silence and meditation. There's a winery in Sonoma that meditates at the beginning of every team meeting and then reflects on their meditation. Google employees actually meditate in front of some of their more intense meetings because they've recognized that without some of that stillness and that sense of connection to who they are not good problem solvers. So this is one other way to create positive relational energy. In our team, we have seen over and over and over again people use icebreakers. I used to think those were for losers, but I have decided they are not because it seems to work. For example, in our last week, our meeting, we were asked by that week's facilitator what one of our favorite holiday traditions is. And one person said they love Cookie Day, where we make a whole bunch of cookies to send off. And Trisha, I think this was yours, right? Making shortbread for everybody to give away. So lots of creation of gifts to give out. One of our friends who doesn't like it dark thought holiday lights were quite nice for cheering everything up. And then I personally am fond of Tuba Holiday, which my dad conducts at the Elsinore Theater. They get 60 tubas on stage and we sing along to carols and, religious songs from all over the different traditions every fourth December 24th. So lots of different fun ways to share. So those are some ways in which you can bring the joy. And that brings us to the end of our 5 resolutions. To recap one last time. 1, know the business case. Where's the money? 2, build in respect. Know what it looks like. 3, make accountability to results possible. Know how you're keeping score and make that score visible. 4, play as a team. Everybody has a role. They're all there to go to the goal. And 5, bring the joy. And together, all of those will help you have better meetings in 2019. So as we wrap up, one last question for you all. Of all of that, what's one thing you're taking away from here today? And do we have any final questions before we get to our last few wrap-ups? Bring the joy, yes! Yeah, rotating duties, that's a great one. Wonderful. Any other final takeaways? All right. Well, please feel free to continue sharing. And as we wrap up for you, I know that Trisha has something else for you to take away. I'm going to turn it over to you, Trisha.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Great. So one thing I would love for you to take away today is one of our books. I do have a promo. It is a short-term promo, so I'm going to just add it to the chat right now. I'm also going to send it to you in an email. Don't worry about copying it, but you can go right now and get it. Use the 2019 Rocks promo code on our store. That will give you 20% off the paperback book. But I'm also going to be giving you a free version of the digital edition. So I'm going to send that information to you in email after this because you attended. So yeah, you stayed the whole time. Good for you. And I'm actually going to run one more poll to see. I have a question for you. And I think, Elise, I'm not sure if yes, that's the poll. Thank you. How should we follow up in the new year with you? And we do have this poll, and maybe you could launch it, Elise, because I don't think I have the ability to do that today for some reason. And we can figure out how to best follow up with you. And, you know, if there's anything, so for instance, one example would be that we are launching a meeting school, and we want to know what you think. There's a lot of different options you can follow up with us on, but I assume the poll is up, but I cannot see it. So I think I joined as a participant today, and when I should have probably joined as a panelist. Sorry about that.
It's up. It's up. They've
Okay,
got
great.
it. Yeah. So any final ideas, if there's any way that we can follow up with you, please let us know. And of course, you'll get email from us later.
Yes, we'll send you not only the recording, but also the slides and that promotion. So thanks so much for joining us today. Excellent.
Well, guys, we are just a minute before the end of the hour. So why don't we go ahead and end fabulously ahead of schedule. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will, again, be sharing the recording and the email and all of the things, and we hope you all have a fabulous holiday and a happy, happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us.